Evening, everyone, and welcome back to Geopolitics with Tyberius. Today, our good friend Nate Dallon is back, and we're going to be talking about immigration and the Northern Triangle. So roll that intro, and we'll be just right back. Everyone, we are back with our good friend Nathan Dallon. Dallon, please introduce yourself. Let people know who you are for anyone who doesn't. And I was just explaining to Nathan that he's actually one of my most popular fan favorites that we have on here.
Which I think is a sad commentary, Ty. We got to get you better guests. That's all that means.
Oh, come on. You're fantastic. All right, so explain who you are. And
yeah, I'm Dallon. I live in Omaha, Nebraska. I graduated from Brigham Young University, undergrad in poli-sci and Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish. Law school, Creighton University School of Law in Omaha, Nebraska. And then I've been practicing immigration law for the last 7 years. I just opened my own firm this last April, which is going well. We should talk about opening small businesses sometime, Ty, just like what that experience is like.
Sounds like hell.
Yeah. No, it is. Well, I mean, you know, it's got its ups and its downs for sure. But I recommend everybody try to start their own business at least once. It's part of America. Anyway, but yeah, I'm an immigration guy, and I want to talk about immigration. I'm a little pissed, Ty. I have to admit, I'm upset. Earlier this week, I think it was on Sunday evening, one of my attorney buddies graduated with me in 2014 from Creighton. Mm-hmm. He messages me and he sends me the former Border Patrol head honcho guy. He'd written this article that sort of outlined why, in his opinion, the border situation is as bad as it is in 2021. And I was so mad that he so clearly does not understand what's going on that I was pissed. It caused me to realize either one of two things must be true. Our elites are really stupid. Like, the depths of the stupid inside of our most important institutions in the United States I underestimated how stupid these people were. Or two, we have a bunch of conniving liars. I'm not sure which one it is. I really don't know. But it has to be one or the other, because this guy's a total hack. I mean, an absolute hack.
I usually lean on the second and not the first.
Yeah, that's too bad. So this is so funny. He served under, I think, 4 different presidential administrations. The Democrats and the Republicans both liked him. He was in charge of CBP for the last 2 years of Obama and the first 4 years of Trump. And he came out swinging hard, saying that the Biden administration has really screwed up the border. And I fundamentally disagree. Not to say the Biden people have done well. We got to be careful. It's just there's this causal chain that he argues in his little piece that it's just wrong. I mean, the causal chain is just wrong. And so even if you hate the Biden administration and think that they're just an amnesty-laden, open borders, utopian cult, and they just want as many brown people to come in and cure us of our whiteness as possible.
Oh, God.
even if you think that's what they are, because I know that opinion exists, this causal chain does not show you what the solution is. If you think that what the Trump administration was doing in 2018, 2019 was actually going to address the long-term issues at the southern border, then you're an idiot. Or you're a liar. I'm not sure which. I think they're probably just idiots, though. I think in this case they're actually idiots, and I'm going to show that. I'm going to show that with data and facts. I'm going to make fun of this guy who's a really scary dude. He was in the FBI and ran the counterterror cell out of L.A. from 90 to 2000, so he could probably kill me really, really fast, but doesn't matter. He's an idiot, and I'm really mad at him, and that's why I'm a little bit...
I got you.
And just, it's just... Humans are humans, okay? I just want to be very clear about this. I'm of the opinion that all people more or less act the same way in the same circumstances. I don't assume that there's these angel, altruistic people who, if they were in charge, they would do so much better, or that there are these just demon people, and if somebody else was in charge, we would do much better. I think people are people, and most of them respond to incentives almost in the same way, given the circumstances. And I think that if you have that mindset going into the immigration problem, that will help clear up a lot of the garbage right away. Because there's no good guys and bad guys, right? Like, that's my point. Don't go in thinking there's a group of good people and a group of bad people. Because if that's your paradigm, you're going to be frustrated because the data will never make sense because it doesn't fit that narrative. So,
all right, fair enough. So before we get into this particular episode or this particular presentation, Nate has been with us before, and if you are interested in looking at, we talked about the Biden administration when they came in, who they appointed, all that kind of thing. One of my most highly rated episodes. Go check that out. It's in the Conversations playlist, and it's just got a nice picture of me and Nate on it. It was technically a mask off episode more than it was a Geopol episode, but this is where we kind of pull things together for 2 shows. And without further ado, Nate, I'm gonna max out this presentation, and you are good to go.
Okay, so just to begin, the Northern Triangle, we're talking about 3 countries in particular, right? So our countries are Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. Are there other countries that matter for the U.S. southern border immigration purposes? Yes. That would include, especially right now, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, and of course Mexico. But we're focusing today on the Northern Triangle. Why? Because in the last 20 years, that's where most, if not all, of the immigration has come from for our southern border. So let's just start with the basics. Okay, so this is gross domestic product per capita in Latin America and Caribbean countries. So I've talked before, Ty, about push factors and pull factors. The U.S. has a pull factor, and I think it's fairly stable. That pull factor is we're America. Our geopolitical position is best in the world, right, Ty? I think you back me up on this.
Yeah.
Like, getting to the United States automatically improves your family's situation just by getting here. Even if you live in the crappy parts of the United States, your situation improves immensely. But I'm not even just talking about the difference between the U.S. and, like, number 2 and number 3. As you can tell here on this first slide, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras are per capita GDP less than $5,000 US per year in terms of income. So, in our hemisphere, these are almost the 3 poorest countries. The only other one that's super poor is right underneath it, which is Nicaragua, right? And they're just south of that triangle. So there's an enormous amount of poverty sitting right there inside of those 3 or 4 countries. Why that's the case, we could do that. I don't know, maybe that'd be worth our time one day, because the number of people escaping these countries is going to be so large. It might actually be kind of fun to do a hour-long breakdown of each one. But it's just really important to understand, like, Trinidad and Tobago is like triply as wealthy per capita as people in Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras are. Like, Mexico is more than double, right? It's all, like, illegally immigrating from Guatemala to Mexico doubles your prospects. I mean, that's how bad the situation is there. And so your baseline push factor is automatically high. And I think that this, by the way, comes from the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR. I've got the tag there if anybody cares. But they've done a pretty good, I think, way of illustrating this inside of the slides, or just in sort of the graph. So you get a real sense, like, oh yeah, these are basically the poorest places on this half of the planet, which is true. All of this one, homicide rates in the Northern Triangle and surrounding countries. So you can just get a sense for how bad the situation is. Mexico's real bad, right? So you'll see there, Mexico is dark red. It's 27 murders per 100,000 people. Honduras is worse. El Salvador and Guatemala are slightly better. The point is, this is just a very bloody zone, okay? The murder rate is crazy high in these particular places. So not only do we have low GDP and mass poverty coming out of the Northern Triangle, we also have very high levels of violence. So the likelihood that just a random person in El Salvador or Guatemala or Honduras is going to have known someone personally who has felt street violence in their life is almost guaranteed. And all of the clients that I have that come up off the southern border, they all have a story about their Tio or primos getting shot in the streets and are dead. And I just think that this helps, again, put some numbers and a little bit of a map to what exactly is going on in terms of the murder rates. At the same time, even though we have a really impoverished, very violent zone of countries, we've got this birth control and infrastructure issue. Okay? So Ty, you and I talk about this a lot. So birth rates in the United States, this matters a lot, a lot for all sorts of economic well-being indicators. You cannot have an overly old population that has a strong social safety net with a little workforce underneath it, especially in a consumption-led economy. So if we look, I'm up here, we have Mexican birth rates. So this is U.S., Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Okay? So these are their birth rates. If I recall correctly, I think this is, what are these 12.4? I can't even remember what my...
That's birth rate per 1,000, if I remember.
Per 1,000. Okay, yeah. So out of every 1,000 people, you got a 12.4 birth rate. The actual absolute number doesn't matter. It's the relative numbers that matter, right? So Mexico is way ahead of the United States in birth rate. Honduras and El Salvador are both ahead of Mexico, about the same. But the real number to look at is good old Guatemala, right? Guatemala is humming. I mean, they almost have a little less than double the birth rate that the U.S. does per 1,000. Okay? Again, this is CIS. This is, I can't remember. They're called like something immigration services. I can't remember exactly, but they're actually they're very negative. They don't like a lot of immigration coming up, and so they're outlining one of the problems we have. I appreciate that they pulled out the Guatemala population by 5-year cohorts as of 2005. The reason this matters is you'll see what's the largest cohort. Oh, it's that bottom one, right? And so we've got 16% of the population was 0 to 4 back in 2005. And these numbers have more or less held true. Now fast forward 15 years. Now we have 15-year-old kids in a country where there is depressed economic opportunity and quite a lot of street violence. Guess where that cohort has walked up to? Southern border in the United States. So again, the push factors, because Guatemala has had such a high population growth rate relative to all of its neighbors, there's a lot of walking Guatemalans all over the place. And I also want to emphasize, it's not just the United States that has this problem. Mexico has an enormous number of Guatemalans who have illegally immigrated and just started working in Mexico, right? And I want to highlight that the U.S. is not the only country that has a problem with the southern border. It includes Mexico, and it is stressing their infrastructure and their politics just as much as it's stressing ours. Even though most of the people are just transitory and are going to go park at the U.S.-Mexico border, they have a lot of Guatemalans who are getting into Mexico and staying. And you can imagine in Mexico that if you feel like Guatemalans are stealing your jobs and you're already in a pretty poor environment, that doesn't go over well, right? So there's a lot of pressure on Mexico as well as the United States.
Can I interlude for just a second here?
Yeah.
So for anyone who is a fan of mine, who has access to my stuff, on my Facebook page, I have 2020 demographic info. It's a little outdated. I'm slowly working that together. But if you want more updated population pyramids, I've got quite a number of them. I was just looking over just a second ago. I've got Honduras. I've got Guatemala. I don't have El Salvador, but El Salvador is really small. So
yes,
it doesn't really factor on most of my data because it's kind of just overrun. And we'll probably talk about this more in the outro, but I just wanted to give that there. Plenty of data on my Facebook page. Definitely check that one out.
Yeah, and I think just for everybody always, whenever you start thinking about large social issues and large economic issues, it is a good idea to think about your demographic and labor base as part of your analysis and framing of a problem, because that will help us. It will seriously clear up why certain things are happening and how they're happening. Like, why are the boomers acting so differently than millennials? Well, if you look at our demographics chart, well, it starts to make some sense, okay? So I think it's just really critical. This next slide, this is the data straight off of the CBP website. So that's Custom and Border Patrol. Okay, these are their numbers. This shows fiscal years 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021. At the time I downloaded this, the September data hadn't come out yet. So the fiscal year goes October to the end of September. That's the fiscal year. That's why we had this whole budget and debt ceiling problem at the beginning of October, is because that's month 1 of the federal budget year. So we can see 2021 actually starts October of 2020 and then marches forward to August of 2021. And we had 1.5 million border apprehensions. So this is important because, of course, 2021 has been a banner year for detentions at the border. It might end up being the biggest year since 2000. In the year 2000, we had a 1.6 million border apprehensions. Here we are in 2021, and we're almost back to that exact same number. I just want to highlight a few things. That orange line is 2019. So you could see that 2019 was also an enormous surge relative to the other 2 years. And if we had 2017's data in this graph, which we don't, but the 2017 graph would actually be the lowest of all 5 of these. Why does that matter? Well, 2019 was the year that President Trump had instituted the family separation policy and what's been lovingly called the Remain in Mexico policy, right? So both of those policies were in place during the entire calendar year of 2019 for the federal government's purposes, so from October to October. And you can see that there was still an enormous spike. I think the total number came up to be 977,000 apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexico border in 2019, even though the Trump administration had imposed what they thought were very strict policies. We'll come back to this. Were the things that they were doing really effective? One might say, but Nate, look, 2019 had a very steep drop-off towards the end of the year. That's, of course, seasonal. Even though it doesn't look like it from the blue line, there's often a drop-off during that period, okay? So again, this sample size isn't super huge, but there is. There's generally a drop-off as you get into the fall. So that's not surprising. What really was the surprise was that 2020 totally flatlined. But of course, it's not surprising that it would have because we had the pandemic. And that created a series of problems for people who were interested in coming to the U.S.-Mexico border. The most obvious one being everybody started getting freaked out. And Mexico sealed their border on the south and said, we're not going to let anybody through because of the pandemic. But guess what happens at the end of 2020? Oh, look, Mexico decides, no, we've kind of got this whole pandemic thing under control. And then you see what I describe as pent-up demand for immigration. So the people who probably would have been coming over in 2020, they all got lumped into 2021, plus the people who would have normally been coming over in 2021 anyway. And so now you get an extra big spike in those particular numbers. Underneath those line graphs, there's a couple of bar graphs. This just tells you what the distribution of people arriving at the border are. So there's single adults. FMUA are family member total units. I can't remember exactly what the U stands for, but those are the family units. The next grouping are the single children. So these are kids who are, 18 years old and younger. And then the AMs, those are actually people who get caught at ports of entry, ports, like actual ports, and then in the field, but it's still near a port or a border spot. So those numbers are just really, really small. You can't really see them at all. Next up, this kind of gives you a breakdown of where people are crossing, how they're crossing, and the percent changes in terms of the overall movement, okay? So we've got all sorts of interesting data. You can go month by month, look through how many single adults are showing up, how many family units are showing up, how many single minors are showing up, and you can flow that through. There's obviously the Office of Field Operations. Those are the folks I was telling you about before. They kind of have, they're near these places, but they're not technically on the border, and they're run by a different agency. That's why they have a different reporting system. And then there's U.S. Border Patrol, and they're large numbers. And then you see right there, there's 1.5 million people apprehended as of August. This is where people cross. So this is a goofy map. The reason I say it's goofy is because New Mexico is not present. People cross in California, they cross in Arizona, and they cross in Texas. They do not cross in New Mexico. Why is that? Because New Mexico is hell. It is actually hell on earth, and the wilderness acts as our border buffer. And I can tell you this as well. I've spoken with lots and lots of immigrants who have made it across the border without being apprehended. No one crosses in New Mexico because it's a death trap. And this is critical because one of the big policies that people love is the wall. All of the southern border used to be inhospitable hell until we built infrastructure so that the desert became passable. And one of the things that you have to build a wall is you have to have a road. And once there is a road, you can get an Uber driver. And so if you want to build the infrastructure that would support a wall along the southern border, you would actually decrease the effectiveness of the desert as a deterrent for people to try to cross. And I know that's counterintuitive, but that is super true. As soon as the wall popped up in Arizona and there were checkpoints and there was a freeway, suddenly that became a hot spot for people to cross the border. Same thing in Texas, right? As soon as you put up the freeway, you start building infrastructure, people start coming to those spots because before it was just hellscape and you died. And so this is the tricky part about the southern border, and I think it's relevant to keep that in mind. You can see the Rio Grande Valley. It is. People cross the Rio Grande River, and that is where they hammer immigration the most, right? I mean, that whole sector between Rio Grande, Del Rio, and Laredo, I mean, that is more than half of all of the crossings take place just in that zone. It's really something. The stories out of there are harrowing and totally crazy, both for Border Patrol and for the immigrants. It's a really wild time for all parties involved. So these are important numbers. Okay, so up at the top it says U.S. Customs and Border Protection encounters, U.S. Border Patrol Title 8 apprehensions, and then Title 8 inadmissible volumes and Title 42 expulsions. So I'm going to decode all of that gobbledygook for you. Title 8 of the U.S. Code, so of the big fat federal law books, controls all of immigration. Okay, so if they are held under a Title 8, that means they are underneath normal immigration processes. If they're under Title 42, Title 42 is where the CDC pulls all of their regulations. Okay, this is critical. Title 42 is the COVID emergency actions at the border, which allows for there to be expulsions, meaning immediate deportations with no due process, under the COVID emergency powers of underneath Title 42. So that's really, really critical to understand. And what you can see here are these are the grand totals. So these are the numbers of people who these are the encounters. Oh, does it not say? It may not actually say here, but the numbers when it comes to Title 42 expulsions were 800,000. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. We had 1.5 million people show up. 800,000 of those people were immediately deported and sent back to home country underneath Title 42 expulsion. Right? So that's a little more than half. I think once we get the full numbers out, it'll probably be 55 to 60% of everybody who hits the border gets immediately expelled under Title 42. And that had started in 2020 and that continued into 2021. The rest are the Title 8 apprehensions, and then they fall into the normal immigration system. So what does that mean? Well, that means there's an intake. So we'll grab an immigrant. We start to go through the process of identifying who they are, where they came from, why they're here. If in that process of getting the basics, they determine that it's someone who's been deported previously, they're automatically expelled. If they pop up on the CIA's radar for any reason, automatically expelled. If DEA has a rap sheet on them, automatically expelled. If the officer locally believes that there was any human trafficking involved, automatically expelled. Then the next question becomes, if you're here and you aren't any of those categories, do you have a fear of returning to your home country, right? This is the asylum loophole. So as soon as you say, yes, I'm afraid to return to my home country, then each administration gets to make a decision. If you're under age 18 and you arrived by yourself, almost entirely you have to be taken and allowed to come into the United States to make your asylum claim in your own good time in front of an immigration judge or in front of the asylum office inside the United States. If you're a full family unit, they get to make a decision. And this is where the Trump people made the decision, let's start separating the parents from the kids. Okay? The Biden administration has done the opposite. If you're a full family unit, we let you into the country. Okay? So they get treated as though they were juveniles. The third category are, I'm a dad and I brought my 2 kids. My wife came 3 days later and she other kid. So now we've got our family of 5, but we're at 2 different checkpoints at 2 different times. That's a complicated situation, but often they both get released into the country, they reunite and go live with family members. The last group then are single men who aren't juveniles and they don't have their families with them. Almost all of those people inside of Title 8, they get expelled through what's called expedited removal. So they're asked, are you afraid? You're a dude, we don't really care. move along, right? And then they just expel you straight back to your home country. So what ends up happening is this year in the United States, of the 1.5 million, about 400,000 will be tagged and allowed entry into the United States, and then they'll hang out in the U.S. and wait for court dates or wait for the asylum office to give them a full interview and a full vetting. So that's sort of the situation. The Biden administration is going to end up deporting this year alone more people than Trump did the first 3 years. It's just, the numbers are just really, really huge. But he's gonna end up having deported around 1.1 to 1.2 million people. All right. Jesus. Yeah, it's a lot of folks. Now we get to this next part. All right, this is where I get a little bit frustrated. Okay, so Mark Morgan, he was in charge of the Border Patrol from sometime in the mid-2000s up until last year when he resigned as soon as the Biden administration got elected. So he wrote an article with Hillsdale College. And I've linked it there. It's called imprimis.hillsdale.edu/disaster southern border. And he makes this statement. But what we are hearing is bunk. What he's referring, of course, to what the Biden administration is saying about the southern border. The fact is that when the U.S. opens its borders, which is what it amounts to when we return to a catch and release policy, illegal immigrants flock to the U.S. That's the root cause of the crisis on our southern border. Okay, this is not true. So let's break down exactly what he's talking about. So catch and release. I just described to you what catch and release looks like. I'm seeking asylum. If I'm a juvenile, I'm caught and released. If I'm a family unit under the Biden administration, I'm caught and released into the U.S. If I was in the Trump administration and I was a family unit, the parents would be separated from the children. The children would be caught and released into the United States and then lost. And then the parents, one or the other of the parents would be expelled. The other parent would then be released into the country, and they wouldn't know where their children are, and the government stopped tracking who their children were. Okay? The second thing that the Trump administration would do is they tried to start a process called Remain in Mexico, and we'll talk about that in a second, but that was supposed to be a substitute for the catch and release policy, right? A couple of other things that he mentioned in his article was we stopped building the wall, which made him mad. Okay, fine. He talked about what's called the TVPRA, or Treat Juveniles Differently Than Adults Act, 2008. And in 2008, the Obama administration said if they are children, we can't hold on to them for more than 30 days. So if you get a 17-year-old kid, you can stick them on the border for 17, 18, 19, 20, 25 days, but then we need to cut them loose because they're kids. And if you recall, there was this problem of all the cages down in the southern border with kids, and it was this exact problem. We have to keep the 17-year-old boys and the 15-year-old girls separate from each other. We can't just turn this into a dorm, right? And so, obviously, 17-year-old boys and 15-year-old girls who are juveniles and scared, they might find ways to comfort each other, which would not be good, right? All right, fine. So we keep them separate inside of these cells, but it looks really bad, and it's not a good situation. And the guards have all complained that they hate treating kids like prisoners when all they've done is show up at the border because their families forced them to come up here, right? And a lot of those kids had to pay money and human traffic themselves to the border. So it was bad for morale. It was bad for everybody. So the Obama people said, fine, new policy, we'll just have 30 days and done. Guess who continued that policy? The Trump administration. Guess what the courts have said? If you keep them longer for 30 days, that's a habeas corpus violation. You don't have reasons to keep children detained for long periods of time if they haven't actually done something to warrant to be in there, except show up at the border. So the courts say no, the Trump administration themselves hasn't changed that, and the Obama administration were the ones who started it, but I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. So I don't know why he complains about that, but whatever, I digress.
Two questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you said this started in 2008?
Yeah, so this idea that you have to have your kids released within 30 days.
Okay, right. Sure. Like the only reason I asked because correct me if I'm wrong, but the Obama administration doesn't come in until January of 9, right?
No, that's right. I mean, the Bush administration are the first ones to reinterpret what the TVPRA Act. So it's like the William Wilberforce Anti-Child Trafficking Act. Okay. And inside of that, the Congress tried to give special provisions to make sure we were taking care of kids at the border that we thought were getting trafficked. Okay, so the Obama administration just created, well, it was the Bush administration, and then the Obama folks took it over, was we're going to just have a 30-day rule to try to implement the will of Congress when they passed this thing originally.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's true. The Bush administration started it. The Obama administration was the first one to really push that hard. The reason that matters is in 2012, Obama announces the DACA program, right? So what happens, and the timing on this was really unfortunate, but 90,000 kids showed up to the border in 2012. Okay, so they called this the Obama surge because the DACA plan gets announced, and then over 90,000 unaccompanied teenagers show up at the border, and there's this 30-day rule that's only been around for 2 or 3 years, right?
Right.
So that creates a really bad moment for the Obama administration because they just said, hey, we're going to do DACA. It's not really going to affect anything at the border. And then 90,000 kids show up, right? So it was terrible timing for the Obama folks. And of course, a lot of people, including this guy, Mark Morgan, the former head of CBP, makes the argument that the 90,000 kids came because the DACA program got announced. Of course, DACA doesn't cover those kids. Like, we need to be very clear. DACA only covers kids from 2007 and behind. So if you've arrived in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, DACA doesn't apply to you. It only applies to kids who arrived in the United States and have been continuously present since 2007. So all these DACA kids showing up in 2012, if they showed up because of the DACA program, they're morons because that doesn't apply to them. But of course, the Hispanics don't know the niceties of the immigration laws, right? I think it's just the push factors are pushing them to the border. Did you have a second question, Ty? Sorry, I kind of just started rolling again.
No, you're fine. There was a second question. It was, where's Biden on this? Has he changed anything from what Trump was doing?
Yes. Okay, so everything that you see here, the Trump administration was aggressively pushing for wall expansion. Mm-hmm. That was mostly symbolic. The reason I mention that is, remember, the data I just showed you are apprehensions. Right. That means these are people who have been apprehended. If we'd had a wall or not had a wall, their apprehension status would not have changed. Because all those folks show up to the border and claim asylum anyway. If they show up to the wall and yell asylum at the wall, they're under international law, we still have to give them a shot at asylum. So that doesn't fix anything. What the wall might do is stop all the people we aren't counting. Right? Mm-hmm. That's the charitable view of the wall argument, is that it would stop people that we aren't counting that are crossing the border. Now, of course, how bad is that problem? That I can't say. No one can. We don't have good estimates. But I can tell you this. Border Patrol is very, very good at their jobs. They get a lot of these folks. The number of men that I've personally met as clients who have been able to cross at the border effectively without getting hit by ICE or CBP is nearly zero. I think I can think of one in the last 5 years, right? Like, it's just, from my anecdotal experience, it's just a very, very small number of people. And the ones who do it are the ones who do what's called the desert walk through New Mexico, right? If you can survive the 25-day journey through the desert in New Mexico, frick, I think we need to find those people and put them in the Marine Corps, right? Because, like, holy smokes, they've sacrificed so much to get into the United States. They normally end up being pretty good citizens because I say that in the colloquial term, not in the technical term. They end up being pretty good neighbors because they've sacrificed so much to get here. But if you want to say that the wall would be effective for the people that we are already apprehending, the answer is no. We're still obliged by international law to give people a shot at asylum once they arrive at our neutral zone, right, which is the border. And so that doesn't change that. Okay, so it's just confusing to me. Biden stopped construction. The second thing is this Migrant Protection Protocol, or what is sometimes lovingly called Remain in Mexico. So the theory on this was this. While they were doing the new NAFTA, what's it called?
USMCA?
Yeah, the USMCA. Trump told Obrador and his predecessor, because I think they started the negotiations before Obrador was even in.
Yes.
He said, hey, you've got to help us with this immigration problem, okay? Like, I've got this problem. You guys need to help us. And he kind of rolled that into the negotiations, okay? So what this says is people who are claiming asylum, instead of being caught at the border and then released into the United States, we're going to turn them around and keep them in camps in northern Mexico, right?
Okay.
Obrador signed up for this, and he said, fine. I think his predecessor is actually the one who committed to it. Obrador went along with it because Mexico trade relations with the U.S. is critical, right? However, that plan is now in place. Trade has been flowing, minus some COVID stuff, which is a mess. You want to know why there's supply chain issues? It's still because of the COVID crap. That needs to stop. I don't understand why the Biden people don't see that, but I digress. But more or less, those trade agreements are now in place, and Obrador did his part. That's how he sees it. Biden comes in and is like, no, we're not going to keep asylum seekers outside the United States during their waiting period. Instead, we're going to go back to catch and release. Okay, so that part is true. I just want to highlight a couple of things. One, this program started at the beginning of 2019 and did nothing to deter people from showing up at the border. Two, Mexico limited the number of people who could remain in Mexico at 56,000. Over 900,000 people hit the border in 2019. So the Remain in Mexico policy was mostly a I'm waving my flag saying how awesome I am at trying to keep immigrants out, because it kept less than 10% of the overall number of people claiming asylum at the border out of the United States. Okay? So now the Biden administration comes in and actually gets rid of the Remain in Mexico program, and Texas sues because they're pissed because, of course, they deal with this problem more than any other state. Tip of the hat to them. California might deal with it just as much, but they actually like the immigration. So Texas is pissed. I get that. Texas says, hey, you got to go put those people back in those camps. Trump had a particular policy. You can't just capriciously end his policy. By the way, that's the exact same logic that the Biden people now use with DACA, right? So when Trump went and sued the DACA program in court, the respondents said, hey, you can't just get rid of DACA because you're a racist. You have to go through a process and have real reasons for stopping the program. And the Supreme Court turned around and said the exact same thing about the Migrant Protection Protocol, or the Remain in Mexico. They said, hey, you can't just stop programs because you're the president now. You have to have reasons, and you have to go through a particular process to make sure that that happens. So this is really critical. DACA is safe, and the Remain in Mexico policy is now safe. Biden has to, by court order, restart the program by next week. Okay? So the Remain in Mexico program is going to start up next month. So it's coming back. It's coming back.
Wait, okay, just real quick. Next month or next week?
I think it's next week. At least that's what I understand. I haven't read the case on that. But it's supposed to start in the next, within a couple of days. I don't think it's into November. It has to be sometime in October.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's really, really critical. So, of course, Chief Mark Morgan, the counter-terrorist guy who could kill me in my sleep if he wanted to, claims that DACA, TVPRA, the wall, and this migrant protocol, plus a little bit of this Flores settlement agreement, that has to do with that case in 1997, where the court was worried that the U.S. wasn't providing sanitary and humane conditions while they were holding immigrants in detention. So the Flores settlement agreement also capped the number of people you could keep at any facility at any given time, right? Because there's at some point, if your border is overwhelmed, you might start shoving 30 people into a room with 2 beds, right? Mm-hmm. So the Flores settlement said you can't do that crap. And so obviously Mark Morgan doesn't like that. He would love to be able to shove 30 people in a room with 2 beds. So these are all things that sort of limit and handcuff Border Patrol from what they can and can't do. Now, so let's start with this Migrant Protection Protocol, this Remain in Mexico program. That requires Mexico's help and approval. It's their country, right? If they say, no, you can't do this, then guess what? No, we can't do it. So let's see what Obrador has to say. This was August 24th of this year. President Andrés Manuel Obrador said Mexico will continue helping the United States on immigration, but he noted, quote, it can't go on forever. And said attention must turn to development in Central America so people don't have to emigrate. Quote, we have taken it upon ourselves to help the U.S. government on the immigration issue. We're going to continue to do so. Close quote. Obrador said, quote, we have tried to keep migrants, in shelters, above all to protect minors, women, the president said. But this can't go on forever. We have to get to the bottom of the issue, and that means investing in the development of poor countries. That was an apparent reference to López Obrador's proposal to expand Mexico's mass tree planting program into Central America, which pays farmers to plant fruit and timber species. The U.S. government so far has been slow to take up the proposal. Here's why I like this. This is from the AP, so you could click on that if you want to sometime. But Obrador has made it clear, I am going to keep the word of my predecessor, and we're going to continue to help for a little while on this whole remain in Mexico thing. But it's not staying for forever. And guess what he says the underlying issue is? The push factors of poverty from the Central American countries, from the Northern Triangle. What's his solution? He wants to do direct investment and shovel-ready programs in those countries. So he's got this, like, let's plant a bunch of trees and pay people. Whatever, FDR, right? Like, I mean, I get what he's trying to do because he's trying to address the underlying issue. The Mexicans are going to get pissed. I mean, pissed if we drop 500,000 people into camps all along the northern Mexico territories because we have this wall and this new program. That's going to be a disaster. And the last thing the U.S. needs is somebody in Mexico who makes it easier for these caravans to get up to the United States and doesn't work with us. So we've only got so much goodwill we can burn with Mexico. I don't think this Remain in Mexico policy is going to work long term. It's a Band-Aid. It's like a tiny Band-Aid and you're bleeding out from a cannon wound coming out of the side of your body and you're trying to stick a Band-Aid on it and you say, look, I did Remain in Mexico. It's not going to fix anything, and it's going to piss the Mexicans off. Here to the right, I've listed the border apprehensions by year from 2000 to 2021. Red are Republicans, blue are Democrats. Okay? 2000, 1.6 million, Clinton administration. It's the biggest year they have on record, 1.6 million people. We will probably beat that once the data from last month comes in. Okay? I just want to highlight this because this border crisis that we have right now is not that new. We literally did it 20 years ago, right? We literally just did it. 2001, 1.26 million people. 2002, 900,000. 2003, 900,000. 2004, a million. 2005, a million. You see what I mean? Like, during these Republican days, after 9/11, when we were super freaked out about terrorism, the numbers stayed high. The Department of Homeland Security gets organized. Things become much stricter at the border. The Hispanics didn't care. They kept coming, right? 2006, a million. 2007, 800,000. 2008, 723,000. There's that TVPRA bit that I just mentioned to you, Ty. 2009, 556,000. Look, Obama's first year, he crushed the number. Lowest number they'd had in over a decade. Oh, the Democrats are so strict on border security. 2010, 463,000. Oh, keeps going down. 2011, look, Obama's killing it. 340,000. Oh, it perks back up a little bit. 364,000. That's the year of DACA. Then 420,000, 480,000, and then it falls off again. 337,000. I guess Obama figured out what he was doing. 2016, 400,000, right? So he kind of bumps around in that range. Trump comes in. Look at that number. Look at that beaut. 310,000. The Messiah has come. The border is now under control just because Trump is present. Just his presence, his golden hair has stopped the problem. It's going to zero. Then 404,000. And this is when they decide, oh, we got to be tough. We can't have this number going up. Let's do separate families. Let's try to do this Remain in Mexico program. They push really, really hard. 2019, 859,501 people at the border. 2020, the number halves, but of course that's because of COVID. And then we have 2021, we're back up to 1.5 million. Why do I highlight all those numbers? The policies don't matter. They don't. The push factors matter. Demographics matter. GDP matters. Violence matters. Go look at when hurricanes hit the Northern Triangle. Guess what happens 9 months later? There's a surge at the border. What happened in 2020? They had COVID and they had 3 different hurricanes that led to historic mudslides in Mexico or in Guatemala. And guess what? There's a record number of Guatemalans showing up at the border. That's what matters. The U.S. could line up soldiers every 100 yards for the entire length of the border and shoot people, and I think they'd still be showing up. So unless you're ready to genocide a bunch of people, there's really not a lot we can do when those push factors are so strong. So, like, much love and respect to this guy, Mark Morgan, but, like, dude, go pound sand. The Trump policies were not going to do anything. Trump got lucky that 2017 was a low year. He just got lucky. And maybe his presence His Jesus-like aura would continue to have a couple more lucky years, but the trend was already getting away from him, and the more harsh they were, the less effect it had. So like, I just can't anyway. So when you see the Republican governors and the members of the House down at the border saying this is the Biden administration's fault, just no, they're idiots. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to handle this problem at all. They have no clue how to handle this. No one's actually done decent thinking about how to handle this problem. The left is just as bad. I told you this before, Ty. The Democrats don't know what to do. Half of them do believe in open borders and do want the white race to be extinguished, right? So it's like, all right.
Oh my God.
So we extend this whole thing, but it doesn't work. Bernie Sanders knows it doesn't work. You can't have a huge social safety net when 2 million people are crossing the border every year. You can't do that. You can't do it. He used to know that. He forgot because the wokeness virus is so embedded in their brains right now, they can't see past the fact that, oh, this is America's fault. No, it's not. Guatemala is an inhospitable mountain range. The only thing that we did that's our fault is we gave them decent health care so that they don't have an infant mortality rate of 50%. So then their population got too big. The excess can't be absorbed by the local economy. They have to come to the U.S. That's what we did, is we were nice to them. Like, this is not the U.S.'s fault, but we still have to deal with it. It's still reality. So anyway, that's sort of my presentation. But just know, there are zero smart people in D.C. right now that know anything about this problem, and I haven't heard one piece of advice from any of those people that would indicate they know what's going on or how to actually handle the problem. So, like, we're just effed. Like, from my perspective, I could tell you my opinion on what I think we should do, but it's never going to happen. It doesn't matter. They're just going to keep coming, and it is what it is. So deal with it.
Fair enough. Give me a second here. All right, I want to close that out real quick. I want to actually move that away. All right, so one-on-one time. And then I told Cyrus if he wanted to keep rolling here, he could. So we'll see if he shows up. So, steering away from great replacement memes, but actually real politics right now, is that look at what we've seen in Texas back this year. It was on track to go blue. And then what happened? Hispanic communities took on border security as a serious issue, also in line with the fact that they got help from the government, being, checks. And they're like, you know what? I can vote Republican. And we had 9 points of swing from this community alone. If the Democrats want to play that game, they can play that game.
They will lose. No, I agree.
Yeah, and what have you seen the data that's been coming out of opinion polls lately?
No, I haven't checked.
Hispanic support for the Democrats is collapsing.
Well, it should. I never thought they should be over there anyway.
Well, that's its own thing. But I mean, my dream of the super conservative coalition, or if you will, just getting, breaking down these racial lines to the point where people vote based on their principles, is starting to form. And if it continues that way, that would be amazing.
I love your optimism. I need that in my life right now.
Well, there's a lot of reasons to have optimism, or not. There's a lot of reasons we need optimism right now. Good God.
Right. No, that's right. That's exactly right. Well, so a couple comments on this. First, I think that the conservative movement is where all the Hispanics, second generation, and then those who naturalize to become citizens, I think that they are all almost on every policy issue. They're going to cut Republican anyway. It's just that up to a certain point, the Republican Party was the party of don't allow me to reunify with my family. Mm-hmm. But enough of the immigrants have now been reunified with their family that critical mass of people can now say, oh, I wanted to protect my family. Go screw everybody else. I came to this country for a reason, right? And go do this sometime. The next time you're at a true Mexican restaurant, go find the ones that are talking English to each other and just ask them. Be like, hey, what do you guys think about border security? They'll all say the same thing. Dude, lock her down. I don't want every scumball that we ran away from 20 years ago coming across the border. They'll all say that. So you're right. The Democrats are idiots. They need to figure something out. They need to come up with a coherent border policy. A coherent one. Or no, not even a policy. Because again, I don't think there's anybody smart enough in D.C. right now to actually come up with a policy that works. They need to come up with a goal. The first step to getting a plan is to have a purpose. You need a purpose. I don't know what their purpose is. I don't know what it is.
So
if they can come up with one, I would love to hear it.
So there's a level here where I hate to go into this because I think there's a level of reality here. I don't think that a lot of people in the Democratic Party are wanting to replace the white people. I don't believe that for a second. What I do think, though, is that what the general trend has been is that when they are the people who say, no, we want you to come here, and they have newer people come in, they are predisposed to vote for them because you hear the other people, and they're like, no, fuck off, we don't want you here. And so who do you line it with? The people who said we want you. The thing that we keep seeing in the general trend line here, and this is the greater truth of the whole, is that this is now biting them in the ass.
Right,
because a lot of people who are now second-generation citizens, and particularly third-generation citizens, are actually some of the most conservative voters, and they don't have a lot of these problems, or they're on the other side of it where they live in border communities, and they're seeing drug trafficking, they're seeing human trafficking, they're seeing all these problems that are involved in their communities, and they're wanting to be harder on it. And so who does that push them into the party of? The Republicans.
Makes sense.
And I've talked about this for a few years. And at first, I thought I was crazy. I thought there's just no way. But every data point that I saw going since 2017 was that Hispanics were going to become one of the biggest voter bases for the Republican Party going forward. And at least from 2016 to 2020, we've seen a surge, 9 points. The only other group of people that surged more was people making under 30K. And let's be honest, there is unfortunately a lot of overlap there.
Right. No, that makes sense. So hold on. So nationalism generally and border security particularly, you think will become a political force that helps tighten up a bunch of the conservative base and actually grows it at the same time. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, to some degree. We've had this conversation, and that was largely the party realignment conversation. Here's the real thing. Now, these people are a little bit contrary to what's going on. When I say nationalists, there's a lot of different people in the nationalist category, but they have been out of the voting bloc since 1945. They were the people who were they were the America First Committee. They were the people that said, no, we're not wanting to get in Europe's affair. We don't want to get involved with all this. We're going to look after American interests. They were the people who were like, look, we'll embargo Japan. Fuck Japan. But we're not going to get involved in that shit. And then what happens? World War II. And then they really get a strong voice as soon as the war ends. And they're clamoring really hard to get the United States out of Europe, to come home, enjoy the post-war era, regroup, rebuild, which we kind of rebuilt out already as it was. But then the Truman administration and the Republican, particularly the Eisenhower administration that would follow suit, said, we can't have you. We openly cannot entertain you because everything that we fought for is in jeopardy because of these people called the Soviets. And both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party shunned those voters for 2 full generations. Almost 3.
Almost 3, right.
But now, Trump said exactly what a lot of them were wanting to hear. And it's funny because they align with 2 other groups really well. They align with unions really well because unions have the exact same economic policy to a large degree. And we're talking about trades unions here, not social unions.
Right. Not the government unions, yeah. Sure.
We're talking about people that are like, no, we don't like free trade. We like worker protections, that kind of thing. Tariffs was the number one thing that labor unions were looking for, particularly trades unions were looking for, since 1991. And they never heard it until a Republican started saying it. And what has happened to labor unions in the last 5 years? They've
entirely switched the Republican Party. Yep.
The labor unions in particular, or the trades unions in particular, yes. A lot of the other unions are still kind of debating on where they're going. And I don't blame them because right now the Republicans are being really weird about who they want to support. And a lot of people are kind of figuring them flaky. But I think, and I've said this with everything that I had in the breakdown, unions are going to keep going right, And they're going to keep going with that because conservatism and being anti-business is now a right-wing thing. Because who runs the businesses? The left. The left is now the big CEO corporate class. So weird. Used to never be that way. All right, cool.
No, I totally agree.
Here's the real thing when it comes to immigration. What I'm talking about is the nationalist crew is huge, and they've definitely shown back up. And I don't even think they're all here yet. I think there's still a few of them that are out in the cold that are thinking about it. But there's a problem.
You're talking about the Democrats who are still nationalists, and they just don't realize it yet.
Well, there's definitely some of those too. But here's the thing. The reason why the nationalists are concerned is because there is one group of nationalists that are just like, America first, we're a land of opportunity, we're a land of greatness, wonderful, let's go. But there's a darker side to that. There are legitimate ethno-nats in the country, and they were absolutely activated by Donald Trump, and they loved the rhetoric that was definitively, I'm going to say it, it was racist, particularly with comments regarding Mexicans. They are incredibly active, and you see people like David Duke openly active about who they support and why. The Republicans Republicans are going to have to deal with that. Because if they get too active towards the ethno-nats in any kind of major regard, Hispanics aren't going to play that game. Even the ones that consider themselves, and I don't think this is a slur, but gringo. Right?
Yeah. Well, it's a slur towards us. It's fine if you, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, this will be a definitive conversation that the Republicans in-house are going to have to deal with. And it's going to be interesting where that goes. But if
it's easy. It is really easy for the Republican Party to go ahead and message really well on southern border toughness. Mm-hmm. It's another one to actually get border results, and I don't think anybody's going to get them. Right? That's my underlying point. I agree. I think if you just go talk to moderate Democrats, they're concerned about it. Right? They are. They're concerned about it. Moderate Democrats are truly, honestly concerned. Some of them are because they have these tendencies towards unions. Unions understand very, very well what an influx of millions of low-skilled labor does to your ability to make money, right? We've talked about this before. It's just too obvious. Obviously, people come in, soak up jobs, and they keep wage levels down. That just is part of basic market operations. And that happens, and so of course people are going to be worried about it. And then there's also the social safety net aspect. If you're pushing hard for Medicare for all can also include an asterisk that says plus the 10 million extra people that are going to arrive in the next 10 years, right? Because that throws off all your calculations. It throws off how you distribute resources. It's an enormous nightmare. So those things are at odds with what I think moderate Democrats really want, which is a slightly stronger social safety net and better wages for working class people. And you cannot get that if you're going to have a huge influx of immigrants. They know this. The problem I see is that what you're going to do about it. It's really easy to message on. It is. It's super easy to message for the Republicans right now. Every governor in the country, including, by the way, did you see what happened when Idaho's governor went to the border?
No.
Oh, Ty, you've got to check this out. So the Idaho governor gets on a plane, leaves the state. The lieutenant governor, who is elected separately, so they're not the same ticket in Idaho, the lieutenant governor says, emergency powers, he's gone. I'm banning all mask and vaccine mandates. I'm tearing down all health orders. I kid you not. There's like a little rebellion in the executive while the governor is down at the border. He freaks out, hops on a private jet to get back as quickly as possible, and is like losing his mind because all the health stuff got undone as he was down there. So I just find that very funny. But anyway, they all have perfect messaging opportunities. All of them. And they're all going to go down there, and they're all going to message really, really hard. And then what? Unless they start shooting people, they're not going to get what they want. They're just not. So whatever. Message away, guys.
So here's the question for you. And Osiris, you've been listening in. You've been watching a little bit here, and it's good to see you. If you have any questions for Nate while he's here, feel free to do that.
What's up, dude?
Okay. Hey, what's up? How's it going?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. By the way, I've only got 3 kids, Osiris. I feel like I got a lot of catching up to do.
Yes.
So
I am kind of an expert at this, yes.
No, I know. By the way, the two of us, we got to hold it down for all these panels of all the childless, right? Because they're the reason that we've got this market force of sucking people into the country at the southern border. You and I are doing more to fix this problem than the rest of these schmucks put together. So I just want to tip my hat.
Amen. Amen. Agreed. Look, these guys don't know.
They don't know.
Uh,
They don't know.
and look, it's actually good work. It's a good time. It's a good fun thing to have kids
That's right.
until they break your your favorite hobby thing.
That's right. Well, we'll get them back when we're 70. I plan on being in diapers and making my kids change me the whole 9 yards. I'm ready for that.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I'm not doing it.
All right, so the slight rubs against me aside, go on.
Oh, it's all right. Well, I was just going to throw this out there, and Osiris, you can ask me any questions you want, but I think the way you fix this problem is you create a formula. I know people hate formulas, but you got to create a formula that is independent of the politics of the moment. So it would take a year like 2021. The formula would have to take into account the following: the unemployment rate, birth rates, employment or like participation rates inside of the economy, and then like wage movement, and then the number of job openings, right? Somehow take those 5 or 6 factors, throw them together, and then create what I would call a work permit program that is outside of the system as we currently have it. So the system we have currently says you have to have a pre-existing connection to the United States to get a legal visa. That means I've got a family member, a job offer, or an education opportunity inside the U.S. That's the only way to legally come here, okay? So the other way is to show up at the border and claim refugee or asylum status. Okay, that's the humanitarian side. Right now, because these 3 categories of prior job offer, family in the U.S., or education opportunity, those are such narrow categories, right? The average Guatemalan does not have a shot at one of those 3 categories. So the only shot they have is to rush the border and hope, right? We've got to create another category, which is just actual temporary workers, but not for any particular field. There are certain agricultural temporary work permits, but it's the same problem. You can't get the permit and then go find a job. You have to have the company come recruit you in home country, pick you up on the temporary visa. They provide your transport to and from. Like, you see what I mean? Like, it's not just a free agent card. It's like you're doing a transfer from one team to another, right? So I think you've got to create this free agent thing where it's like, look, we're just going to generate 150,000 6-month work permits this year. You go in, you get your work permit, you work, 6 months run, you go back. And then next year, the formula will tell you, oh, it's a little less. We're having harder economic times. We're going to downgrade that to 100,000. And then on hot years where there's like, oh, we have way too many job openings, it jumps back up. You see what I mean? Something like that. That way you take a lot of the feeling out of it. You give a lot of these folks who are down in these countries feeling like they have to rush the border as their only option. Now they'll be like, oh, I've got a shot at that 100,000 visas, even if it's a little bit of a lie, right? Because like,
I hate this so much.
You can do it all you want, but it would work because then everybody would line up and just keep shooting for all these work permits, right? Instead of trying to rush the border and actually try to get in that way. And so that way we could actually have a process and we could have a capped number and it could shift just based upon how much is available according to this machine. I want the AI to start taking over more jobs, Ty. That's what I really want. I want to cut the politicians.
You're going to get that either way.
Well, good. In that case, let's just hand it over to frickin' Skynet right now. We'll just ask Skynet, yo, Skynet, how many Central Americans do we need this year to cover our jobs? It will give me the number, and we let those people come up. Because otherwise, the adverse incentive is to just show up at the border, create the crisis, and then hope. And then once they're in and they're here more permanently, then they become an anchor for the rest of their family to then petition their way in. You see what I mean? Like right now, all the incentives are to rush the border. You've got to take those incentives away. And if you're not going to shoot them, what are you going to
do? Okay, so here's my thoughts on this, right? I can actually go either way on immigration because I've got a pretty balanced thought on this, I suppose. So I kind of want to commit to one or the other. Either one is simply that we're going to be like, look, we're going to let anyone in because we have we have this ideal. We are a country that will let almost anyone in as long as you obey our laws, you obey our standards. We'll give you a shot, and if you make that shot, fantastic. We'd love to have you. Or we go the exact opposite way. The United States government works for its citizenry, and you have a hell of a time getting that citizenry if you are not from here. And we are going to help you improve your end we're going to help improve things on your end and work that way And so we can have some kind of like mutual agreement or understanding so that you don't want to leave. I want one or the other. Okay, cool. You want to let Central America burn? Let people in. Let them join the American family. Let them hang on. If you're not going to let people fucking in, you've got to do something about these Central American states. Now, are you ready for my Tiberius's gigabrain take that no one likes?
Oh boy, buckle up, everybody.
Annexation, boys. Let's bring them in.
Oh, jeez.
Welcome to the 51st state, Guatemala. Let's fucking make it happen.
No.
No, Osiris.
No. Hey, listen.
You just made Cotter happy. Doesn't he love that plan?
Actually, he does. And a part of it's memes. Like, for real, part of it is memes. But to some other some other side of this is that here's my problem with the Central American states, real hard. I think they're going to be manpower exporters for almost all of their existence. Because geopolitically speaking, even if we try to bail them out and help them in any way we can, they are going to be subjected to factors that are far beyond their control. And that is being part of the Central American drug trade and being subject to some of the most horrible geography on the planet. They aren't going to be able to survive this as independent entities without being completely overrun. And I think that if you want a stable Central America, it's going to need a security guarantor, an economic guarantor, and a political guarantor. And that is either one, you make them client states, which always is really messy, or you bring them straight up into the family. You're like, look, you've got a bad situation. We feel for you. You know what? We're opening our doors to new possibilities. Come join the team. That's where I would go with this. I know that's something.
So you going to be the governor of Guatemala? Are you going to run for office if we annex Guatemala, or are you feeling more El Salvador? Who's going to run these places, Ty? What do you got there?
Who's going to run them?
Yeah, start assigning people.
Well, okay, here's the problem.
And how do you tax them and all this other like logistical shit?
Wait, hold a minute. I can answer this. Number one, who's going to be governor? It's going to be among from their communities, right? We're going to have democracy. We're not coming in to annex them and occupy them. They're going to be full members of the family. They're going to run for office just like you would from any other state. Okay? We're going to bring assets and materials in. We're going to help build interstates. You're going to have I-5 down through Guatemala City.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine?
Yes, I can. And it's going to be glorious. Okay? So, no, seriously. They need that level of financial and political security, and they're not going to be able to get it by themselves. That is the reality of the fact here, for me personally. Now, this might be a meme for people. They don't want to entertain that idea. Fine. I'm going to sit here and say it. What else you got? You want to help them out with USMCA, or what is it? No, USMCA. The Central American Free Trade Agreement? Well, we instituted that back in 2001. It's not helping it's not helping them nearly to the degree that it helped Mexico. So,
that's totally true. Yeah,
free trade hasn't really helped. We've tried to work with them, with FBI informants, all that kind of thing, giving them training. It's helped a little bit, but they're politically destabilized, they're economically destabilized, and a fucking hurricane destroys the place. And they have no FEMA. So what do you do?
Big facts.
What do you do?
Skynet. Osiris, what do you got? Do you have any ideas on this? I still think Skynet's the way to go, but we'll see if Osiris can.
I say we go back to our empirical ways, and we just start taking over Central and South America. Fuck it.
Okay, I was going to give him the option.
We got lots of cocaine down there and plantains. We're gonna be fucking rich, and that's how you tax them too.
Well, how about this? Let's cut it down the middle. Let's just go Blade Runner on those countries. We'll just go tell Pfizer or like Bayer. Doesn't Bayer own Monsanto now? Be like, hey guys, look, we're gonna sell you Guatemala to the company. We'll see if the private sector can run those places better.
Wait, isn't this what we did in Hawaii?
Basically, yeah. And we kind of did it to Cuba, right? It's one of the reasons why they felt like the communists were going to be a better option than Dole and Little Chiquita or whoever the fruit company is that was just running them into the ground. Like, let's see. Will Jeff Bezos buy Guatemala? Let's see if we could just pitch it to him. Like, you buy Guatemala on the cheap. We'll give it to you $20 billion. Let's see what he says. Help pay down the debt a little bit. Hand him Guatemala. Let's see what happens. Made in Guatemala instead of made in Mexico or made in China.
I hate this idea. Okay. God damn it.
I got a couple questions here.
it.
This is some of my questions that I heard you guys talking about earlier, and I want to expound upon, and some things that are probably from chat. So let's start with the Haitians. Can we walk through like what's going on with the Haitian situation? Basically, what I understand it to be is that there were some Haitians down in South America somewhere, and
like Brazil.
yeah, like Brazil, and that was due to the working during the Olympics that they had, and they just remained there, and then now they're here.
Yep.
Is that accurate?
Yep. You got it.
But so here's the complicated thing, right? Some of those people haven't been to Haiti for what was it, like a decade or two?
Yeah. Like 2000, was it 2008 was the Olympics down there? So it'd be like, what, 12, 13 years? Something like that?
And then and Haiti is in maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe in worse shape than it was then.
For sure. Yeah.
And then we just go like, we just airlift them all and just like fucking drop them off there. Is that like a policy? Yeah, like I don't understand that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's walk through this. So real high picture. When a deportation happens, it requires two parties. Like the U.S. can't just be like, hey, Mexico, take the Guatemalans, right? Mexico's a sovereign nation, and they can say, no, we're not taking non-citizens into our country, right? Okay. So I have to, as an American ICE officer or whatever, I have to have the receiving country say, yes, we will take that person. So Haiti is willing to take its own citizens. They really want to, by the way, because they repatriate a bunch of money, right? It's like those people have been off working in economies that function. Now they've got connections there. They can bring a bunch of money and get money transfers into Haiti, so they'll always take them. Brazil let the Haitians come over on temporary work visas. The Haitians overstay the visas, right? After they overstay the visa, they hang out for 10 years working illegally in Brazil. They beeline it to the U.S.-Mexico border. They get detained. ICE says, hey, where would you like to be deported to? They say Brazil. They call over to the Brazilian government. They're like, I never heard of that guy. I don't want him. Yeah. And then they ship him off back to Haiti because where else would we send them, right? Unless a third party country comes in and says, oh, we'll take some of these people off your hands for you, which, hint, that never happens, right?
Right.
That never happens. So that's sort of the basics on that. Just a quick note on Guantanamo. The reason Guantanamo still has people in it is because the Uyghurs, who were training with the Taliban, right, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Uyghur terrorists are in the Cuban zone inside of Guantanamo Bay because the U.S. has said, who will take these guys who were trained by the Taliban into your country? And guess what China said? Oh, we'll take them. We'd love to have those guys back. We'd love to shoot them on the tarmac and broadcast it. Right? And broadcast it live to our populace to say, look what we do to terrorists because I'm Xi Jinping, right? That's how they operate. So the U.S. is like, okay, crap, we can't deport them back to their country of origin, which is China. We can't let them into the U.S. Technically, they've never done anything to the United States, right? They've never taken a criminal act towards us, but they're trained terrorists and Islamic extremists, so we can't bring them in here. So we sent out a bunch of feelers. Yo, Europe, do you guys want these guys? Nah, we don't want them. Like, we literally ran out of places who would be willing to take these people, and we're not willing to ship them back to China, who would lovingly take them and shoot them on the tarmac. So guess what? Now they get to live in Guantanamo until they die of old age, right? And it's because of the same problem. And I met a guy once in Sioux City, Iowa. He'd gotten order deported like 10 years ago, and he's from El Salvador. And they couldn't deport him because El Salvador couldn't verify that he was from El Salvador. So ICE had him, like he was a criminal too, like he'd committed a bunch of crimes. ICE had held on to him for like a year and a half. They could not find a way to deport him because El Salvador was like, no, we cannot verify he's ours. You don't have any information that he's ours. He just says he's El Salvadoran. He's some bad guy. We don't want him. And so he just got cut loose into Sioux City, Iowa. And that's just how it goes. It's like, they're not going to Guantanamo that guy, right? He's not a terrorist. He's just like a dude who smoked a bunch of weed. So, whatever.
So decriminalization, got it.
Question, Osiris? Sorry, I just want to make sure. Did I cover that? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I understood some of it, but the chat, it was a combination of my question and what chat was talking about.
For sure,
Um,
for sure.
yeah, yeah. I mean, part of the reason I'm a little bit surprised too is that it seems that, as you already stated, the policy seems a little bit flexible on how we deport people, as in if we're going to actually do it or not.
True.
And which is why I was a little bit surprised they did airlift as many people back to Haiti as they did.
Yeah,
Uh,
which gets back to my point. This, like, the Biden administration is not some let all the immigrants in. Right? That's not the situation. That's not the facts on the ground. I mean, he's going to end up deporting well over 1 million people in the first 18 months he's in office. You know,
yeah,
that's not an open borders guy. Now, you could say he's still not as strict as Trump. I mean, he certainly doesn't posture like Trump does, but he's not some open borders, I don't believe in America's sovereignty dude either.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. All right. Next one. Is there any info that's showing that in the current wave of immigrants coming from Central and South America, that they're bringing there's an actual like a noticeable criminal element, or
Yeah.
is it so like because Mexico had an obvious criminal element with the cartels? Are we
Yeah.
seeing that with Central and South America?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer to that is, of course, it's complicated. The Ty already mentioned this, and it's true. Inside of the Northern Triangle, the street gangs are very very violent, and they're bad news. The most violent is this MS-13 gang, which was actually started in L.A. Shout out to whatever their
Something
neighborhood
else
is.
we deported.
That's,
Arson.
that's exactly right. So they had a bunch of these illegal immigrants. They detained them all in the same federal facility in like Southern Orange County someplace. They started this really violent prison gang called MS-13, right? And I think it's like Mara Salvatrucha. So I think that's like the name of one of the guys who was in there. Mara is just Spanish for like a organized crime. So Mara Salvatrucha Trece, I don't know where the 13 came from. Then all these guys got slowly deported back to El Salvador. They got the old group back, the buddies back together from their criminal days, and they slowly built up the most violent of all of the cartel networks in all of Central America. The problem with those guys is they don't run nearly as much stuff into the U.S. What ends up happening is they just have U.S. chapters. So there was like this really sad situation in Maryland where there was a very strong chapter of MS-13, and it ended up with a bunch of juveniles, like high school age kids, getting shot and killed in the streets. But almost all of it was immigrant on immigrant violence inside the community in Maryland because of stuff that was happening back home, right?
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is yes, there's a bunch of violence there. Now, the more pointed part of your question is, do we see like an uptick in the violence of the immigrants coming in? So are they bringing a whole bunch of this violence with them? The answer to that is it's a more mixed bag. Of course, with those juveniles who show up at the border alone, not surprisingly, they have no family network and they don't speak very good English. So when they go to whatever city that they go to, who do they hang out with? The closest thing that you can find to a family structure for young men, which a lot of times is organized street gangs. And so they do soak up quite a bit of that. The adults who come with family units, they're like almost crime free. The only crimes that they'll commit are they believe in corporal punishment in a way that Americans do not. So the hit your kid 12 times with the belt. Most police officers in the U.S. don't take kindly to that, but they'll still do that. But outside of like that little problem, they're actually quite good. The one other thing I'll mention on this too is when El Chapo got taken into custody, it broke the peace between all of the gangs in northern Mexico along the border.
Right.
Now, why do I say along the border? The border is very lucrative for the gangs. When we talk about human trafficking, like what does that actually mean at a technical level? Well, what it means is you have to pay a series of bribes to coyotes and to members of the gangs on the border in order to be given safe passage to turn yourself into border patrol. Okay, so you have to pay someone to traffic you through this like predetermined route to get to the US border. So these people traffic themselves, right? Like they pay money. That money then gets distributed to pay off, it's like protection money along your trail until you get to the US border, then you turn yourself into border patrol. So what does that mean? That means some of the most interesting economic activity in all of Central America and Mexico is happening at the northern border. Tons of cash is switching hands, and since it's a gray and a black market, whenever there's enough cash, somebody starts shooting somebody, right? I mean, so places like Ciudad Juarez, which is on the other side of El Paso on the Mexican side, it really is a hellhole. Like there is unreal levels of violence as gang members fight for turf to control the human trafficking routes so they can get money off of those routes. And, I've always wondered if we got the true libertarian paradise, if there would ever be like a Walmart militia and a Target militia, and they start shooting each other for territory, right? I think that's more or less what happens on the U.S.-Mexico border between the gangs.
Oh, my God.
And by the way, I support the Walmart militia because there's nothing more fun.
I'm Team Target.
Look, there's nothing more fun than being not clear-minded and going into Walmart in the middle of the night. You'll just see the most random shit. It's great.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Oh my God.
All
right. So, do you guys have
ahead.
anything that you guys want to add on to this? Do we have any more questions, or do I want to wrap up at least the recording for this for Geopol?
I just want to close out with one more question, and that's it.
Okay.
Real quick. So you said that policy doesn't seem to work for immigration, but it seems that intervention is a little bit dubious to a lot of people. Going down there and just like dropping money in places seems a little bit like it doesn't work. So what is a middle ground, or what kind of thing can, besides annexing places? Okay, what can we do to move forward from this? At least maybe not to even solve the immigration, at least to get the Democrats and the Republicans to move forward with something.
So that gets back to, I think you have to give a sense of hope to the random citizens of Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. You have to throw them a path of legality to come. Like I said at the beginning, I think they're coming no matter what. So unless you're ready to genocide people at the border, which increasingly I think the number of people who might answer yes to that would shock us, right? But if you're not willing to do that, then what you need to do is you need to allow them to create a legal line away from the border itself. Right? And so even if it's a little bit of fool's gold, you just create a certain number of visas that are temporary or that could get to legal permanent residence. I've said this before. Look, I think one of the ways we can solve the immigration problem is make it expensive. Tell somebody, hey, you're going to get you're going to have a 5-year work permit. If you want, at the end of the 5 years, you can self-deport. We can come find you, right? Or you can pay us $100,000 and you can become a citizen. Like, run up the fee super, super high. And guess what? They would do it, and they'd come up with the money, and it would be worth it, and everybody would win. Right? Like, they would love this. You kidding me?
Oh, my God.
Every hardworking dude I've ever met, they say, abogado, right? That's attorney. So it's like, abogado, name your price. Right? If you're like, give me $50,000, I'll get you a green card, I will pay that. Okay? Well, like, look, guys, let's fine. Just figure out what it is. I think you can add citizenship classes. Right now, we do like 100 questions to become an American, right? Like, you just have to know enough English to get through 100 questions. You only get asked 9 or 10 of them. That's it. Trump wanted to move it up to 20. Oh, right? I think you need to be a little more intense. We could have a more intense assimilation program, right? We could have make it a little bit costlier, like literally in cash. But then you create lines that are legal with a more expansive visa program, because the alternative, the status quo, is actually allowing more people over the border each year, and then they're overstaying, etc., than a new visa program would allow, right? So I think that's what you do, is you allow the lines to remain in home country, you create a visa program, you let some hundreds of thousands, even 500,000 in each year, they all sign up, they pay us a bunch of money to do it, and then we assimilate the crap out of them once they get here. I think everybody wins. Just my take.
So, let me so that I'm clear, what is the Republicans' position on immigration? Because sometimes it's obvious they don't want the caravans of the other people coming to the border. But what if they're in the border? Is it just like deport them all? Can we assimilate them? Can we make them citizens? Is there anything more complicated than we don't want them at our border?
No. That unfortunately, this was part of my rant. I think there's a bunch of idiots. All they like to do is just talk about, we got to get this problem under control. They don't really tell you what they want to do. The closest thing I've seen was Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas. He came up with a bill and never left committee, but he wanted to halve the number of legal visas. So he took the existing program and he cut it in half. And then he said, on the border, we need to create camps on the Mexico side and fill up those places with people, and then just make their lives so miserable that they'll walk away back to their home countries. Self-deportation. That's what Mitt Romney ran on in 2012. He wanted to make it so impossible to get a job in the United States that people would turn around and just self-deport. So the Republicans really just want to make life miserable enough for folks that they'll just walk back. The problem, I think, with that line of thinking is you don't know how miserable their lives are back home.
Yeah. the fuck?
The only way to make it more miserable than what it is back home is to 50 cal people, and we're not going to do that. Stop thinking that way, right? And so the Republicans have talking points that do not mean anything in terms of policy. Nothing. They're dumb. They don't know what they're talking about, and all they do is they just spout off programs that don't actually. It just shuffles people around the border. Great. We still have the same problem.
Yeah. That's kind of the vibe that I got from it, and that's because maybe if you're plugged in all the way deep down the rabbit hole of politics, maybe they were saying something that was cohesive. I just haven't heard it, so that's why I asked that question. Yeah, so I don't know. I think like that we should probably, yeah, I'm kind of with you. It seems kind of obvious, self-evident to me that you create more visas, make the process make more sense than it actually does. Like, what's the average wait time now to get your citizenship?
Well, unfortunately, it gets back to which of the four categories are you in. If you're on a work visa, the timing actually is very, very fast. It's just, can you even get one? So I'll give you an example. There's what are called H1b visas. So these are business visas that last for 7 years, work permits only, right? They have 65,000 available each year. If you can qualify, you can submit. They get almost 500,000 people applying for those visas each year. They get to that 65. They have literally a lottery. So you pay these filing fees, you do all this stuff, you get your job offer, then you go into the lottery, and you only have a 20 to 25% chance of actually even getting the visa, even though you qualify. Right?
Right.
So that's how that side works. If you have a brother who lives in the United States and you're from Mexico and your brother petitions for you, it'll be over 50 years before you can get a green card. If you're from China, it's like 85 years. Okay? So like those people, it's ridiculously long. If you can get to the US though, and you rush the border and you just say, "Oh, I'm afraid to go back to my home country, whatever, just get me in and then I'm going to disappear into the US populace." You've got like a 40 to 50% chance that that's going to work. So you just look at the math. What does the incentive tell you to do? Rush the border. That's the incentive right now. That's why I think there's a problem. You have to create a separate incentive structure so that people will stay home and apply instead of showing up at the border and praying that you'll be one of the 1 in 2 or 4 out of 10 that are going to be able to get across the border and get a job.
Right. Yeah. It seems kind of, it's like another one of those political problems to me that there can be an obvious way for it. There's just nobody's doing anything. Like why does it take so long to get a visa? Why is this lottery program? Like why are we lotterying people? It's kind of weird. Like and the people, if they're in here, this is the United States of America. It's literally a fucking continent. Are they taking up too much space, or are they taking too many jobs? Like, what is everybody so pissed off about? Like, I don't understand this shit.
Well, I think I haven't talked enough about this. I do think that there's a real problem with having too fast of immigration all at once because of culture shock, the way that it messes with local communities. I think that's real. So that's why you're right. The United States has plenty of space. Our geography could handle a much larger population. I agree with that. The problem is that how fast do small communities change on a dime? And we talked about that a little bit before, Osiris. So that's the problem, is that unfortunately it's not evenly distributed across the country. So there is a real problem. Like, I do think there need to be limits on immigration. I just don't think that saying the wall is actually a policy solution. That's just posturing. That is just posturing.
And not only that, like when we take in refugees, we put them in specific locations.
Yes,
so we could more intelligently bring people in, and then
for sure
put them in locations instead of people just like filing in somewhere in Texas or California or whatever, or like South Florida.
No, that's great. And by the way, some of these changes you could make, but it would require some congressional action. So forget it. So what happens? So you just mentioned, why are we doing a lottery? That seems stupid. The answer to that is it's because Congress passed the law back in the 80s. And they didn't allow for this to occur. But when they passed the H1b laws back in 1986, they were only getting like 30,000 visas a year, right? So the thought was, well, once we get to 65, we'll figure something out. Well, Congress can't get their act together. So now what are you supposed to do? And they're like, lottery. Right? So it was some bureaucrat made that decision. Some unelected bureaucrat made that decision. And now it's become a pillar of legal immigration is the lottery system. I mean, it's just, anyway.
That's ironic because I feel like this is exactly the same problem that we are dealing with in multiple places, including like abortion. Like the only thing holding up these laws are like court cases, and not actual legislation. So Congress, if you're listening, get your shit together, all right? That's all I got, Tyberius.
Bays. I've got one question because we hit it twice, and I'm glad you brought it back to it. So, Nate, just as your opinion, what are the assimilation difficulties here? What are the problems that brings into?
Yeah. So, luckily, the assimilation problems you can see most acutely in Europe. When you go from deeply Muslim rural Africa to Berlin, the culture shock and consequences are enormous, right? So that's the place where you would see this most sharply. So what happens in those circumstances is you get populations of people who all coalesce together and they create an entirely different culture that's not German and it's not African, right? And so the problem with this, and you've probably heard stories about this online, is there are zones in some of the major cities in Europe where it's a Muslim zone, and they actually have like little Sharia courts there, right? So like the community has gotten so big, and their culture is so different from European culture that they actually create their own arbitration system to deal with problems. They work outside of the 400-year London common law program. They set up their own program. And that's really, really acute. And so the Europeans feel this much, much harder than we do. Why do I say that? Our Hispanic immigrants coming to the U.S., they actually assimilate quite easily. We have a similar religion. We have a lot of cognates, right? Americans love tacos. Hispanics love tacos, right? But they come from democracies. We're democratic. They understand the basic idea of human rights. You know what I mean? Like, so our distance is much, much smaller. But you still have this problem where if you go to a small town in Nebraska where you have all of downtown or half of downtown has become Spanish-speaking Hispanic, and the other half of downtown is boomer old white people, that creates a cultural friction when there's already economic mobility problems, right? So you take the existing problems in the United States, and then you add in this spicy, difficult topic of they don't even speak my language, they don't take care of their yard the way that I want them to. That just becomes an excuse for you to vent your frustration from these other overarching issues, right? So I think that it makes sense to say we're going to help some of those issues by having forced, quote unquote, like very light-handed assimilation, teaching some culture stuff, teaching folks some English, and doing a little bit more for community investment and work, right? And you could do that a lot of creative ways. Like I think there's probably innumerable number of ways that you could do that, including just getting like money. Just the small towns in Nebraska, if they got block grants that said you're going to get $100,000 each year, create a department of integration and help these folks, they would totally do that, and they'd figure it out on their own, right? So I think there's a way you could decentralize that and make it happen, but I think we should, and it would help a lot with the culture shock and with the friction in these smaller communities.
Yeah, I was actually going to comment on that and add to it is that it sounds to me personally that a lot of the issue here is that you probably, if you're going to bring in newer community members, you want to be around younger people that are going to be able to metabolize that, and really where you want to bring them is places that are growing anyway, right?
Sure.
Hey, roll them into the outskirts of Atlanta, or almost
Austin.
anywhere in fucking Texas.
No, not fucking Atlanta. God damn, Atlanta's like a Look, Atlanta's too big as it is. I've lived there for 6 years, and there's no way you grow Atlanta unless you want it to look like
It's
one of those
still
Matrix
growing.
cities.
It's still fucking growing.
That shit's ridiculous, dude. And for all the people who say they hate cities, I understand why now.
All right, so yeah, my thing here is I think all you need to do is be a little bit smart about it, because look, I'll say this: bringing somebody that is foreign into a newer or into a community that is not new, that's really old and established, and I don't even care, not just white people, black people, other Hispanic people, all that. You bring them into something that's locked down, that isn't changing, that isn't mobilizing. That's where I will agree with you, Nate. Is that's not where you want these folks to go, because they're not going to be welcome. You want them to assimilate into places that you can be welcome, because I'm going to argue this. I don't think they are even going to need to assimilate to a large degree. Because if you go down to Marietta, Atlanta, you know what you see? All kinds of different people. You literally can't see one ethnic group from one table to another.
I was going to say, too. Like, maybe in small rural areas, you're going to definitely run into problems. But in any metropolitan city, And I've lived in Texas and across the South for a long time. Hispanics in the cities is not a surprise to anybody. No, nobody gives a fuck. And they're like, if anything, everybody is happy they're here because, like you said, taco trucks are fucking the shit.
And they don't need to be licensed, my opinion.
Sure, why? I mean, well, I don't want to fucking have the shits too because I eat the wrong tacos.
And you get used to it. It's fine.
Okay.
Just keep going back. Your tummy will figure it out.
All right, so we're gonna hang out a little bit in a bit of a mask off open panel kind of thing. So if you guys want to do that, sure. But I'm gonna close out this recording for Geopolitics because this is gonna be one of my special episodes. So I hope you all very much enjoyed this extended episode of Geopolitics where we had Nate Dallon as our special guest. It's good to see you talking about immigration, getting the real mask off version of it, and yeah, I cannot be happier with having you on here. So. We're going to roll the outro. The stream is not ending. We'll actually probably put this for the recorder, possibly, here in a second. So, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, it has been absolutely fantastic to see you. And feel free to look for all the other content featuring our good friend Nate and Osiris on all of my channel. Without further ado, we'll catch you next time.